first level of intel. It gets higher up as you go to the CIA and DNI. And it reminded me of the 2004 exit polls, right? These first reports can often be wrong, and that's what they were trying to correct today. Bill.
And Britt, I was just...
Let's bring in our friend, Fox News Chief Political Analyst Britt Hume. So good to see you. In all your years of covering Washington, D.C., the Pentagon is one that does briefings quite regularly, but this was a little unusual. Wanted to get your take on how you thought they did this morning.
What?
Well, I was very impressed,
What they
especially
did?
with General Keane, whose description of how as Jennifer has just outlined, of how the targeters in the Pentagon, going back, 15 years, had planned for this moment. The B-2 had been built for this moment, and the bunker buster bombs had been too for this very moment. And I think it's fair to say that the problem with that early report that leaked out of the Defense Intelligence Agency was that it wasn't really plausible that ordnance of this capacity that had been tested.
Hi, Pooja. Pooja! Yeah, thank you for watching. How are you, Pooja? I make ready, I make ready to go to my work. I'm listening to the news.
Pointed out in her reporting when it first came out, it was low confidence, and it seems to have deserved low confidence based on all that we've heard since. Obviously, final reports are yet to be heard, but
This
it
is
was
my
an
room,
impressive
Pooja.
briefing, especially by General Keane.
babe?
I'd like to say a word, if I may, Dana, about Jennifer Griffin, who was
Wow.
attacked by the Defense Secretary today, an attack she certainly, in my view, did not deserve.
Pooja, we have work on...
Professionalism or knowledge
Hi,
and her
mentor.
experience
Pooja, we
in
have
the
work
Pentagon
on
is
Sunday.
unmatched. And I have had and still have the greatest regard for her. The attack on her was unfair.
One thing I was
I'm
going to mention
good. I'm preparing,
Britt, is that
I'm just
the
blow
DIA
my
is kind of like
hair.
on
I'm
the
not yet done.
first level of intel. It gets higher up as you go to the CIA and DNI. And it reminded me of the 2004 exit polls.
Thank you, mentor.
Right, these first reports
Welcome
can
back.
often be wrong, and that's what they were trying to correct today. Bill.
And Britt, I was just
Look
gonna
at my
ask you,
earring.
well,
It's
it was
18K
Go
gold.
ahead, Britt. Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
No, please go. No, I was just going to say that
Pooja, you want laham?
that any negative report that you can get
Hindi
your hands
ba?
on the aftermath of the United States military action is going to be highlighted, played up, and so on, despite the fact that it was early, based on
Hindi
very
nila
low
marinig,
and
guys,
low
ang news
confidence. And
today.
It's disappointing that happens. It continues to happen, but it
Yeah,
does.
I'm wearing
Britt, you
now.
can tell the administration is just really irritated
Because-
about those initial leaks and how they were
Pero-
portrayed in the leaks to
pero-
the media.
parang ang
The
init
president
kasi,
last night,
kaya-
when he was announcing this press conference,
It's
teased it as offering
same old
irrefutable
my-
proof that these strikes were a success. Do you
the
think
vlog.
they achieved that with this press conference this morning?
Well, I
This
think
is
they
the
probably
vlog where I'm
helped,
living
particularly
right
General
now.
Kane's comments. And
Yeah?
look, there's now a body of response that we've seen to this initial report, and we're hearing it from all kinds of quarters, as has been outlined by Jennifer and others, to the effect that the likelihood that this was a very
Pooja,
great
what are you
success
doing?
is the real deal. So obviously we await final reports.
You
know,
can
first
listen
reports are
also.
inevitably unreliable. And
Yeah,
should be
thank you so
treated.
much.
But I
This
think
is
they made some strides
a
today
gift
toward straightening out what I think
last
was
year
some misleading
for my
reporting.
The
birthday.
administration really is
One of
focusing,
my
focusing on
friends,
whoever the leaker was. It was classified
I
information.
think
It was leaked
she
to the media.
is
That is not allowed.
Irene.
Todd
Yeah,
Blanche
thank you,
was on
Irene, for the
with Laura
shirt.
last night. Watch. Is the DOJ prepared to charge whoever is
And I have also
responsible, and
logo
what could those
here.
charges look like?
Even here.
I mean, absolutely. Of course we're ready.
Thank you,
better believe,
Pooja.
and the American people better know for sure that this is exactly the type of conduct that we will investigate fully. Whether it's treasonous or whether someone will be charged with
Akala ko ba
treason,
naka-live ka?
listen, we'll work that out, but you better believe that the Department of Justice is going to do everything we can to find out who did this.
A lot of these leak investigations don't ever ultimately result in something. Is this one possibly different?
Yeah, well, as you suggest, there's a long history of leak investigations and an even longer history of leaks.
Tama na, kaya
And
hindi na
most of
nila
them,
marinig ang news
come to nothing.
sa kabublower.
Leakers know what they're doing, and they do it because leaking is a way to try to exercise power and influence the national discussion. And most of the time they don't find out who leaked them. You know, we still don't know who leaked that Supreme Court opinion in the Dobbs case. We still don't know who left the cocaine in the White House, and the list of these things goes on and on. I hope they find the leaker. It was not inappropriate to leak, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
Britt, I watched some of your posts on social media.
Wait, guys, I
some
just
concerns about some of the
take
reports that
my
initially picked up the leak or
the
the
iron.
pieces of the leak that came out initially. Your thoughts?
Well, the main thing, look, I don't have any objection to reporting the existence of this early report from the Defense Intelligence Agency. What I object to is it being played up as if it were some final judgment, and, you know, in particular a report on CNN left out the fact that this was held in low confidence. That's important. That's a critical detail. I know Jennifer reported when she reported on this, but certain others didn't, especially that CNN report, done by a reporter, by the way, who fell hook, line, and sinker for the Steele dossier, which is now totally discredited, and also bought into the idea that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. So someone who should be regarded, I think, with skepticism.
Low confidence, sort of like America's feelings about the media. All right, Britt Hume, thank you so much. It's great to see you today.
Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, Army veteran, Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and international military strategist, in focus now. We heard incredible detail, and I want to get into that now because Americans likely won't see this anywhere else unless they watch this morning. And I'm disappointed that we hadn't kept our focus on the fine men and women of the military, but we
Hey
did it
guys,
today.
where are you
So
guys
if you'll
been?
give me
Wala
just
nga
a
sila, babe.
moment, I want people to see this from the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Dan Keane.
Pinapakita ko na nag-ano
For more than 15 years, this officer and his teammate lived and breathed
sila sa
this
news.
single target,
Hi,
Fordo,
Douglas
a
Mack.
critical element of Iran's covert
Babe,
nuclear
I'm your babe
weapons
now?
program. They literally
My
dreamed
God.
about this
I don't
target
yet have
at
a
night
babe.
when they slept. They thought about it driving back and forth to work, and they knew from the very first days what this was for. And then, on
ba
a
naman
day in
yung
June
hair
of
ko?
2025, more than 15 years after they started their life's work, the phone rang and the President of the United States ordered.
Ano ba
Let's
yun
bring
eh?
in our friend, Fox News Chief Political Analyst
Oh,
Britt
Fox
Hume. So good to
News.
see you. In all your years of covering Washington, D.C., the Pentagon is one that does briefings quite regularly, but this was a little unusual. Wanted to get your take on how you thought they did this morning.
Well, I was very impressed, especially with General Keane, whose description of how as Jennifer has just outlined, of how the targeters in the Pentagon, going back, 15 years, had planned for this moment. The B-2 had been built for this moment, and the bunker buster bombs had been too, for this very moment. And I think it's
Hi,
fair to
I
say
love
that
feet.
the problem
What
with that
feet?
early
Feet
report
of
that
the
leaked out
what?
of the Defense Intelligence
Feet of
Agency
the
was that it
human?
wasn't really plausible that ordnance of this capacity
Hello, thank you for coming. I love feet.
that had been tested to the extent it could be by the
You're
U.S.
making
military, and
me-
that, so far as we could tell, struck the target precisely, would have done only limited damage. It was obviously a preliminary report, and as Jennifer pointed out in her reporting when it first came out, it was low confidence, and it seems to have deserved low confidence based
Mentor,
on all that we've
what
heard since.
happened?
Obviously, final reports are yet to be heard, but it was an impressive briefing, especially by General Keane. I'd like to say a word, if I may, Dana, about Jennifer Griffin, who was attacked by the Defense Secretary
Anong
today.
bullshit ka
An
dyan?
attack she certainly, in my view, did not deserve. Her professionalism, her
Knowledge
knowledge, and her
is
experience
dense.
at the Pentagon is unmatched. And I have had and still have the greatest regard for her. The attack on her was unfair.
One thing I was going to mention about that, Bill,
Where is the
Britt,
animal?
the DIA is kind of like on
Possibly
the
a
lower,
monkey.
the first
Sabi
level
niya,
of
I
intel.
need
It gets higher up as you go to the CIA.
Ano? I love
But it reminds me of the
monkeys.
2004
Where's the
exit polls.
monkey?
Right, these first reports can often be wrong, and that's what they were trying to correct today. Bill.
Yeah, I'm
Brett, I was
Tagalog.
just going to ask you.
Well, it was a typical.
Go ahead, Britt.
Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
No, please go.
No, I was just going to say that it is typical of the media in our age that any negative report that you can get your hands on in the aftermath of the United States military action is going to be highlighted,
You're
played up,
Tagalog.
and so on,
Behind
despite
your
the fact that it
left
was
shoulder.
early based on very little and low confidence. And it's disappointing that happens. It continues to happen, but it does.
Yeah, Brett, you can tell the administration is just really irritated about those initial leaks and how they were portrayed, at least to the media. The president last night, when he was announcing this press conference, teased it as offering irrefutable proof that these strikes were a success. Do you think they achieved that with this press conference this morning?
Well, I think they probably helped, particularly General Keane's comments. And look, there's now a body of response that we've seen to this initial report.
Hi,
and we're hearing it from
everyone.
all kinds of
We're
quarters.
listening
This
to
has
the
been outlined by
news.
Jennifer and others to the effect that the likelihood that this was a very great success is the real
Ayaw
deal.
nila
So
ng news
obviously
din.
we await final
Hi,
reports.
guys.
You know, first reports are
This is my
inevitably
friend
unreliable
from
and should be so treated.
from
But I think
Russia.
they made some strides today toward straightening out what I think was some misleading reporting.
The administration really is focusing on whoever the leaker was.
My friend is
It was
from
classified
Philippines,
information. It was
guys.
leaked to the media. That is not allowed. Todd Blanche was on with Laura last night. Watch.
Is
Knowledge.
the DOJ prepared to charge whoever is
okay.
responsible, and what could those charges
It's okay. I
look
lost my hair. If I don't lose you,
I mean, absolutely. Of course we're ready. And you better believe, and the
sabi
American
niya
people
kasi I
better
lose.
know for sure.
lose
This
your.
is exactly
My
the type of
friend-
conduct that we will investigate fully.
My friend is single.
Fully. Whether it's treasonous and whether someone will be charged with
Thank
treason,
you.
listen,
Wala
we'll
na ako.
work that out, but you better believe that the
Thank
Department of Justice is going to do everything we can to
I
find
love
out
it.
who
Sabi
did
naman
this.
ng-
A lot of these leak
reveal.
investigations don't ever ultimately result in something. Is this one
My
possibly
friend
different?
is Alms.
Yeah, well,
Oh my God,
as
you-
as you
I love it.
suggest,
Sabi
there's
niya,
a
your
long history of
innocence,
leak
your
investigations and an even longer history of leaks. And most of them
Habang wala
come to
pang
nothing.
tawag.
Leakers know what they're
muna
doing,
tayo.
and they do it because leaking is
Thank
a way
you,
to have to
Pooja,
try to
for
exercise
coming.
power and influence the
Pooja.
national discussion. And most of the time, they don't find out who leaked them. You know, we still don't know who leaked that Supreme Court opinion.
Pooja,
In the
how are
Dobbs
you?
case,
You
we
have
still
duty
don't
on
know
Sunday.
who left
Get
the
ready your
cocaine in the White
energy.
House. And the list of
Masarap. Sabi ni,
these
ano,
things goes
knowledge.
on and on. I hope they find the leaker. It was
Masarap
appropriate, not
talaga.
inappropriate to leak. But I wouldn't hold my breath.
Ano ka?
Brett, I've
Yung
watched some of
memory
your
ko ang
posts
malabo, ikaw
on
mata.
social media.
Huwag naman sa matabi.
You've
Kaya
got,
kailangan
some
natin
concerns
makita
about
ang
some of the
ating
reporters
mga-
that initially picked up the leak, or the pieces of the leak that came out initially.
Zaid.
Your thoughts?
Hi. I
Well,
can tell
the
my
main
body
thing-
you
look,
have a
I
single
don't have any
friend.
objection to
He's a
reporting
single
the
as
existence
well,
of this
I'm
early
looking.
report from the Defense Intelligence Agency.
We are all
What
single.
I object to is it being played up as if it were some final judgment, and
From the
in
US,
particular,
watching
report
from
on
Italy,
CNN
US,
left out the fact
Australia.
that this
Take your
was,
time,
was
guys.
held in low confidence.
Dito ako, Vic.
That's important. That's a critical detail. I know Jennifer reported when she reported on this, but certain others didn't, especially that CNN report done by a reporter, by the way, who
I'm
fell
fine,
hook, line, and
Zaid.
sinker
Thank you
for
for
the Steele
coming.
dossier, which is now totally discredited,
Zig,
and also
Zig,
for
I'm from
bought
America.
into the
Ah,
idea that the
taga-America si
Hunter
ano.
Biden laptop was Russian disinformation.
Zig.
So someone who should be regarded, I think, with skepticism.
Low confidence, sort of like America's feelings about the media. All
Yes,
right, Brett
mentor.
Hume, thank you so much. It's great to see you today.
Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, Army veteran, Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and
age
international
from
military
30s.
strategist. In focus now. We heard
Me, I'm
incredible
40s.
detail, and I want to get into that now because Americans likely won't see this anywhere else unless they watch this morning. And I'm disappointed that we hadn't kept our focus on the fine men
It's
and
okay,
women of
I'm
the
old.
military, but we did it today. So if you'll give me just a moment, I want people to see this from the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, Dan Keane.
For more than 15 years, this officer and his teammate lived and breathed this single target, Fordo, a critical element of Iran's covert nuclear weapons program. They literally dreamed
Ang ganda mo daw
about this
sa
target
30
at night
na
when they
edad mo,
slept.
be.
They thought about it driving back and forth to work, and they knew from the very first days what this was for. And then, on a day in June of 2025, more than 15 years after they started their life's work, the phone rang and the President of the United States ordered the B-2
What?
force that you've supported to go strike and kill this target.
No, I'm here in the
Heroes in motion. We're
UAE,
thankful to all of them. First of
Jimo
all, your
Sumo.
thoughts on that, and then we'll move
I'm
forward.
just listening to the news that
Yeah, good
I
morning,
click.
Harris. It's always impressive to be able to see what the American
Thank you for
military can
coming,
do. The
Jumo.
debate over
Jimo.
whether or not we should, that resides
Knowledge.
in the hands of the politicians. Let them answer those questions. But when it comes down to executing the mission with expertise, we have shown
thank
on
you,
more than one
Knowledge.
occasion. This is just another one that we
Liwo.
can fly
Hi,
around the
thank you for
world,
coming.
target you very quickly, very surgically, and return home.
Hi,
Nobody
poor
else
dirt
can do
farmer.
that. And that's what
I'm
the
also
American
poor,
taxpayer
but
can see in the expertise in the
I'm a hard
American
worker.
military and everybody around the world. I guarantee you.
That's why I
heard
need to
those
work
explosions
harder for
one way
my
or another,
family.
And they're thinking twice
Because
about
we
some
are
of the
poor
things
in the
they may have heard
Philippines.
about the U.S.
We don't
military.
have anything.
And I hope they
We
are,
have
because our
nothing.
goal is to make sure that we're never needed in the first place.
That's exactly right, and that's what President Trump was saying. He wanted this to go in, be a precision strike, and then everybody made it back, and they did. It was
My
remarkable
friend
and a
is
blessing.
37.
Look, what is
Your
important
friend
for
being
Americans to know
interesting.
at this point? You've got a low confidence, leaked
What you
assessment
mean? I
early
don't understand
on before much
mental.
was known at all. We're still waiting for the actual assessment that will count, if you will, with more people on the
I
ground,
don't
scientists,
understand.
etc.
What
What do
you
you think the
mean?
American public
You
should
have a
know at this
friend?
point about the effectiveness of what our military just pulled off?
Well, first of all, Harris, I would say be
Oh,
patient.
really?
One
Infinite
of the truisms in
darkness.
the military is that the first report is always
That's
wrong.
why.
And unfortunately, in this
That's
case,
why
that first
don't
report
trust
came with someone
someone, right?
with an agenda behind them to try to show that this didn't work.
It's better to be
that
safe.
patience means the American people should wait for an actual complete assessment. You can't assess this from airborne and space-based
And I
platforms.
prayed for my
It has
safety.
to have a human intelligence
God will
component to
protect
it
me.
with
I
some
hope.
eyes on or better evaluation of what is happening. That's not done yet. It needs to be done. I'm sure it will be done fairly quickly. But initial reports that close to the activity,
Wow, Jimmy and
you can never
mentors
rely
are
on them.
friends.
And so it's worth being patient and to know when the truth comes out, it will come out. And this was a precision strike by a massive ordnance penetrator. These bombs don't miss. And when they hit, there is a significant response with what they're capable of doing. I'm familiar enough with them to know what they're capable of. Whatever they hit, they were effective. It's just a question of how effective were they and how long would it take for Iran to try to rebuild. I think we're at the point of them taking years to have to rebuild their capabilities ever.
That part of what you just said about the rebuild for years from now, is what we've heard from the director of the IAEA, and also from Iran saying it was heavily damaged. And we know the president and we know Israel have both said it. So, I mean, we have to have patience for the details on this, but what do you make of, that's more than a triangle of sources right there.
What is that?
It is, and I think what you're getting to is a high confidence assessment
Thank you,
that's going to happen
mentor.
very quickly, because the American people rightfully are demanding answers that they are owed. And that's, of course, outside of
How
the
many
classified
friends you
arena
have
that will
now,
come in different
mentor?
ways that Congress will also have to answer those
Oh,
questions,
really?
have those questions asked as well. And all that is to follow. We do have time. At this point, there's no emergency, there's no rush to form conclusions that are based on limited intelligence or lack of knowledge. That's why I believe that the American people do need to have patience.
Salamat po
I
sa
do believe this
pinali.
administration will provide some answers.
Hey,
very quickly.
buddy.
And the American people deserve
Hi,
the
ham
truth,
and eggs.
and not
I love
some
ham and
politically or
eggs.
otherwise driven,
My God.
slow drip of misfacts, misinformation.
Okay, thank you
and
so much,
perhaps
Jimo.
an agenda, as you pointed to.
God bless
So
you.
there
Take
is an
care always.
FBI, criminal
Bye,
investigation looking into
knowledge.
who might have leaked this information. Let's move on, though, for what I've been promising so far this hour, and that is a lot more
Nice.
detail
You make
on that
cha-cha
mission,
every
which came
day.
via, at one point,
Hi,
Chairman
Nabil.
Keane, who also highlighted the young soldiers who
Bangkabelitung,
were tasked with
Indonesia.
defending
I
the
love you
largest
so
U.S.
much.
base in the Middle
Thank
East
you. I love you
when
too.
Iran retaliated. Let's watch.
The oldest soldier was a 28-year-old captain. The
Oh.
youngest was a 21-year-old private
21?
who'd been in the military for less than 2 years. Imagine you're that young first lieutenant, you're 25 or 26 years old, and you've been assigned as the tactical director inside the command and control element. You, at that age, are the sole person responsible to defend this base. As the targets were detected, round after round of Patriot missiles are ejected from their canisters by an initial launch charge. Then the main solid rocket motor ignites. You can feel this in your body if you've ever been around a Patriot taking a shot.
I'm
And
hoping
round
your
after
channel,
round goes
you
out
need
and
more
guides
50,
against those
I
missiles
think,
coming
to
inbound.
reach
We
1,000,
believe
then you can
that
make
this is
live.
the largest single
Wow.
Patriot engagement in U.S. military history. These awesome humans, along with their Qatari brothers and sisters in arms, stood between a salvo of Iranian missiles and the safety of Al Udeid. They are the unsung heroes of the 21st century United States Army.
Sir, you have served. You get the last word.
These are the kind of people that America grows. And it doesn't matter what age they are. When they're very young, they are capable of doing great deeds, and they'll continue to do so. America's lieutenants are non-commissioned officers without whom we would cease to function as a military, are the ones who are capable of these great deeds, and they will continue to do so. This is what makes America's military great. It's not grand statements from podiums by generals. And I love General Keane, by the way. It's soldiers on the ground, sailors, airmen, Marines, who take the initiative to do
Yeah,
what is
but
right
you
when the
still
time is right, no
have,
matter what is going on in the halls of
I
D.C.
still have, it's
All they
okay,
know is they have to do
because
the best
getting
job they can.
monetized is
This is
also
what they do, and they'll continue to do so.
Amen.
step
Colonel Gobb,
to
thank you.
make to be
Thank you,
on
Eric.
live
We're going to send it out to Alexandria
to
Hoff
meet more
live at the
people
White House. Alex, good morning to you.
if you are monetized.
Good morning to you, Bill. Yeah, this briefing that we had just seen, this was the Pentagon's moment to tell the story of this mission, explain what the weapons used are capable of, and in doing so, counter reports that had drawn into question the effectiveness of this mission. General Keane explained a little bit more about how all of this went down and the intricacies of Operation Midnight Hammer. Listen.
The primary kill mechanism in the mission space was a mix of overpressure and blast, ripping through the open tunnels and destroying critical hardware. The majority of the damage we assessed based on our extensive modeling was a blast layer combined with the impulse extending from the shock. Imagine what this looks like 6 times over.
So he says everything worked as planned. All of these weapons performed as they were expected to on an operation that really was 15 years in the making, because as General Keane explained, there had been somebody, 2 individuals actually in the intelligence community watching Fordo specifically as a site suspected of nuclear enrichment this entire time and looking what kind of weapon would be needed to destroy this. It was explained to us that, and to all press that were there, that an attack on a mountainside covered nuclear site really would require the kind of weaponry that would first blast open the cap that they have. That is what happened. The rest went down into the ground, 1,000 feet per second, I believe the general said, exploding in that mission space where really the hub of Iran's nuclear capabilities. Weapon number 6 then was there covered just in case one of those jets or weapons did not work. General Keane saying today it's really not his job to assess the aftermath, but he knows everything worked as it should.
The Joint Force does not do BDA. By design, we don't grade our own homework. The intelligence community does. But here's what we know following the attacks and the strikes on Fordo. First, that the weapons were built, tested, and loaded properly. 2, the weapons were released on speed and on parameters.
I'm here in the UAE.
3, the weapons all guided to their intended targets and to their intended
I'm here in the
aim points.
UAE.
4, the weapons functioned as
United
designed,
Arab
meaning they
Emirates.
exploded.
All right, so something the White House is now looking into is the way that they share information with members
Thank
of
you,
Congress.
guys.
There's clearly an
I'm not
indication
in
there
the
that they feel
zone.
like that some of this leaked initial assessment might have come from that direction. The White House, also, officials,
Lord
law
of the
enforcement,
Beavers,
federal law
thank you.
enforcement are looking into potential charges for whoever this leak
Thank
is
you so
found to have been.
much.
This was early information, they said, and that reporting, the administration feels kind of lacked the full scope of that anyway. They found that to be reckless and an insult to the pilots and all of those who bravely contributed to Operation Midnight Hammer.
He's
Jennifer Griffin, our
a boyfriend
did
of
ask
my
an important
friend a
question
while
during this
ago.
briefing today. She asked about certain imagery that was captured that showed Iranian trucks, I think she said, that had been seen on site one day, gone the next. That kind of contributes to this idea that Iran might have been moving their enriched
You're a good
uranium
listener,
in the days
Cooper.
prior to this attack. Secretary Hegseth, when asked
Your
about
ears,
that, said that they are still looking at understanding where all the pieces
So,
were at what time.
so.
All right, Alex Hoff with a great wrap-up of what we just saw this morning. Alex,
No.
We are awaiting new comment from the White House regarding the leak of a low-confidence preliminary report on last weekend's strike on Iran's nuclear facilities.
Why?
In just under an hour from now, Press Secretary Caroline Levitt
Why I
will
will
be holding a
beat
press
you?
briefing, no doubt answering questions about the newly launched investigation into
Huh?
the source of that leak report, as well as the media's narrative that the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities were not as successful as the administration claimed.
Thank you so
So they are
much.
irresponsibly using that document with low confidence, even though more information is still coming out. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner here with my co-host Emily Campagno. Also joining us today, Laura Trump, host of My View with Laura Trump, Leslie Marshall, Fox News contributor, and Guy Benson, Fox News contributor and host of the Guy Benson Show on Fox News Radio. Earlier today,
Cooper!
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth set the record straight,
Shut up.
refuting a leaked Pentagon report which claimed United States strikes had limited impact on Iran's
Thank you,
nuclear program.
Mentor.
All while touting
Mentor!
the success of
That's my
Operation Midnight Hammer.
sister.
It says in the report,
Not me, huh?
multiple linchpin assumptions.
Of course.
This assessment. A linchpin assumption, you know what that is? That means your entire premise is predicated on a linchpin. If you're wrong, everything else is wrong. Here's the head of the UN Atomic Energy Agency this morning, Rafael Grossi. U.S. and Israeli strikes caused enormous damage to Iran's nuclear sites. Don't take my word for it. How about the IDF's chief of staff? I can say here that the
Yeah.
assessment is
But
that we
she's
significantly
my
damaged the
younger
nuclear
sister.
program, setting it back by years. John Radcliffe, the director of the CIA, putting out a statement just last night. CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by recent targeted strikes. How about DNI Tulsi Gabbard yesterday? She writes, and I quote, "New intelligence confirms what POTUS has stated numerous times. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed." Those that understand, those that see, those that do proper assessments recognize that what the United States military did was historic.
President Trump taking no issue with Secretary Hegseth's press briefing. He wrote this on Truth Social, one of the greatest, most professional, and most confirming news conferences I have ever seen. Exclamation point.
Yeah.
The White House now wants to limit
really
classified
good.
information shared with Congress, a sign of where it thinks the preliminary assessment leak came from. And the president's
But I
deputy
played
attorney
also
general
pool,
says the
like
leaker
that,
will be
billiards.
charged to the fullest
I'm
extent
good
of the
also,
law.
but
I mean, absolutely.
We can
Of course
fight,
we're ready. You better
and I'm
believe,
good
and the
also.
American people better know for sure that this is exactly the type of
That
conduct that we will investigate.
that short video you watch,
Whether it's treasonous or whether someone will be charged with treason.
I'm in
Listen,
color
we'll
pink
work that
dress
out,
when
but
I
you
play
better
that
believe the
pool,
Department of Justice is going
and
to do
I
everything we
won
can to
that
find out
game,
who did
first
this.
game, and my sister
Guy, this isn't
another.
about whether or not the
another game.
The report was put out there. It's how it was put out
Me
there.
and my
It's
sister.
the fact that the journalist didn't question any
I
of that. Put that
uploaded
out there
it.
in legacy media and made it appear as if that was the one that we had all been waiting for. Although it's labeled low confidence. I don't know about you, but
Yes,
I don't even
Cooper.
take baby aspirin with low confidence. I mean, come on, if it says
I'm
that
a
on the label,
housemaid
you're looking
here
for
in the
real
UAE,
stuff.
guys.
I would think
But I'm
that
from the
within journalism
Philippines,
circles,
and
if you got
that's why
this
I'm
leak,
making
you'd
this.
have to at least
I need
do a
to
little
work
check in your
harder
mind about
because
basic
we are
logic
poor
and
in the
common sense.
Philippines. Yeah.
You're like, okay, I'm a curious person.
I don't have
The
anything
Israelis have
there,
had
so I
air
need to work
superiority
harder
over Iran for the
for
better
my
part of 2 weeks,
family.
bombing whatever they feel like, at will, basically. The United States comes in with this extraordinary, unique technology with bullseye hits. Oh, and by the way, the Israelis took out the brains behind the nuclear program, all those scientists, and yet that only set the program back
What
by a few months. It
background,
doesn't make any
Cooper?
sense just to a non-expert, outside observer like myself or like your typical journalist. I think what Secretary Hegseth did there was really smart. He said, don't take my word for it. Let me go
Are
through
you okay?
all the different intelligence agencies that have come to a different conclusion, including the IAEA, which isn't intelligence, but this is their bread and butter. This is what they do. The Israelis clearly have extraordinary intelligence penetration into Iran. They've come to the same conclusion as we have, but we're all supposed to focus on this one report with low confidence. Doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Emily.
And I want to focus for a moment on the nexus between the legacy media's amplification of a low confidence report in stark contrast to under the prior administration when they would rely heavily on the actual sources. So here's a couple examples. And the point too is that the Biden administration botched it. So number one, remember that the Biden administration relied heavily on the intelligence community's assessments of how long the Taliban would be able to stay in power, right?
Yeah.
That turned out to be totally different, but the press ran with it at the time. And what about the Chinese spy balloon, right? The then President Biden told us many times it's upon dependence of the intelligence community's assessments, historical and real time, that we've made the decision to shoot it down over water, to let it ride across the whole country. The press amplified that and didn't question it. And what about the 51 former intelligence officials that signed that letter that turned out to be completely false about Hunter Biden's laptop and Russian disinformation that the press ran with and failed to correct later? And so now you contrast that with a low confidence one report of the 17 intelligence agencies that all of a sudden that is somehow amplified when the director of the CIA says it was successful. Iranian, Israeli officials, everyone is saying it was successful, but one lone small voice that happened to leak it to another legacy figure, and that's what they amplify. It just shows the rot still exists and that it is purely political in legacy media.
I can ride a horse, but
I mean,
I
that's
don't
my
have
greatest
horse.
concern as a journalist. I'm just thinking, are we losing our curiosity and they simply take what they're fed because it does fit that narrative? Right. That is really unfortunate, Laura.
Yeah, well, that is exactly right. And I think that trying to spin a narrative out of this is very concerning. You know, before we're Republicans or Democrats, we're all Americans, right?
Yeah, Rabi, watch my live.
In this moment, this was a monumental, historic achievement. This is something to go in and take out these nuclear sites that presidents before Donald Trump said they all wanted to do. He was able to get it done. This is a low confidence report, and the fact that you had the legacy media pouncing on it, it seemed like they were attempting to weaken America and our footing on the world stage at such an important time like this. You know, you want America to lead from a place of strength. You want us to be able to say, here, we're going to lay it all out for you on the table. Here's every single report. As Pete Hegseth did there, he read all the way down and said, no, we know we got this, we know we got this. You don't want America on its heels in a weakened state whenever we are on the precipice of Middle East peace. You want us in a strong state. And it felt like, I think to a lot of us out there, that the goal of this was the media to attack Donald Trump, as they always do, and anything he does. If he says up, they say down. We know how it always goes, and that's very disappointing.
You know what I'm thinking as you're talking? Whose side are they on?
Well, that's right.
Like, is it the American public and doing their job and getting the information right? I mean, I had news directors tell me, it's great to be first, it's most important to be right. Anyway, I want to get to this before I come to you, Leslie. General Keane, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff this morning, talked about the Americans who defended the American air base in Qatar during Iran's retaliation. Let's watch that.
The oldest soldier was a 28-year-old captain. The youngest was a 21-year-old private who'd been in the military for less than 2 years. So let's put ourselves out there for a second. Imagine you're that young first lieutenant, you're 25 or 26 years old, and you've been assigned as the tactical director inside the command and control element. You, at that age, are the sole person responsible to defend this base. Listening next to you is your early warning operator whose job is to notify you of imminent attack. There's 5 people inside a vehicle and 5 people outside of a vehicle around these, a total of, as I said, 44. We believe that this is the largest single Patriot engagement in U.S. military history.
I know your home state of California has the highest number of military veterans in the country, so we appreciate them. I do want to say that when you hear that level of detail, it's hard not to thank everybody who's ever put that uniform on, especially the youngest among us who did it last weekend.
Well, that's where you and I have something in common, both our dads, right? My dad in the Korean War, we're both military kids.
And my
dad. Listen, I want facts, right? And I want journalists to put out facts. And I do think somebody's like, okay, I've got this and I've got this fast. But a lot of the stuff that we have coming out is fast. So let me quote the president himself when we talk about, of course I have to put my password in because I've got to quote it, right? The president said, quote, the intelligence was very inconclusive. The intelligence says we don't know. It could have been very severe. That's what the intelligence says. So I guess that's correct. But I think we can take the we don't know. It was very severe. It was obliteration. Here's the thing. The top brass at the Pentagon have said to have a really deep dive into this is going to take a long time. We're not going to know. Did Iran move any of the uranium, specifically Fordo? Can they dig Fordo out? They're talking about just water and electrical issues once they dig out. How long will that take? And I think not just the American citizens and voters, but certainly the House and the Senate have a right and a necessity to know all of those details and those specifics. And that's what I saw coming out as an American in questions after that leak. Leak, terrible, but what the leak did is prompted more questions to get more specifics.
Can I just say,
with regard to how bad were they hit, and how long would it take, and did they move any of that uranium before this bomb?
Leslie, I would say this just real quickly, and Guy, I'll go to you next. None of what you just asked should be predicated on something that was leaked, because it's not necessary. I asked those questions too. I want all those answers.
Oh no, I agree with you. You don't need the leak to have
I don't predicate it on, well, somebody told
those
me
are the
that.
questions I asked before, and I'm still asking.
That they may sort of kind of know the answer. No, I mean, you obviously want to know what happened.
I would just make a very quick point. You said when
Your
the
driver
regime
is
starts
not
digging out
coming.
Fordo, I think
What
it's an if.
happened?
Because the Israelis are watching them like a hog. They're not going to let them dig out. They've got control of the skies.
Huh?
Well, no, I disagree. I would say when. All right.
Last word?
Well, and I would also echo what Guy said earlier, which is that the top scientists there in the country who were developing this nuclear program were all taken out as well. So even if they move some of that uranium, even if there's anything left, it'll be a long time, thank God, before they get their hands on anything that's concerning to the world, I think.
The administration said that the DIA report was low confidence intel. Can you share what other assessments are currently underway to get to the bottom of just how effective these strikes were?
Yes, well, I can assure you what the CIA director said, that when we look at the entirety of the intelligence that we have to this date, it concludes that these strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities were absolutely successful. It was a total obliteration, as the president said, and not only does our own intelligence say that, but also the Iranian foreign minister has said that. We saw Israel conclude the same thing based on their own intelligence. We also had the United Nations say that as well. So I think the only other time the United Nations, Israel, Iran, and the United States has agreed on something is that the sky is blue, but they all agree that Iran's nuclear facilities were completely demolished. And I would just like to reemphasize, you mentioned this was a low confidence preliminary intelligence assessment, and the entirety of that assessment was not leaked to the media. Only tidbits of that assessment were leaked to CNN, and we have seen this playbook run before, where you have people in the intelligence community, or perhaps on Capitol Hill, we don't know, but I believe the FBI is investigating to find out who that leaker was, because it's illegal, and they should be held accountable for that, leaked bits and pieces of an intel assessment to push a false narrative. And it's to the same reporter, I will add, Natasha Bertrand of CNN, who has done this in the past. In 2020, it was Natasha Bertrand who had 51 intelligence analysts falsely lie to her, but she still put it on paper for some reason, that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. We all know that's not true, right? We can all agree on that now. That was a lie from the intelligence community. Also in 2020, this same reporter, Natasha Bertrand, wrote that a top intel agency ruled out the man-made lab leak theory of the coronavirus origins. Again, the president was right about that. This reporter wrote a lie from the intelligence community to seek a narrative she wanted to prove, and guess what? We now know that's the truth. Also, in 2024, Bertrand pushed the suckers and losers hoax. She also pushed the fine
My
people
friend
hoax,
is asking,
which
guys.
was taking the president's words purposely
I
out
don't
of
know
context.
why.
And then last October, and I believe this is notable, Natasha Bertrand published an article in Politico from the intelligence agency. She said that John Ratcliffe was speaking without any evidence when he said Iran was attempting to undermine President Trump's presidential campaign. And then we,
Why?
of course, found out that was absolutely true. In fact, the Biden administration declassed an intel report which said they had high confidence that Iran had done exactly what Ratcliffe alleged. They did run an influence campaign to hurt President Trump's candidacy. In fact, we know the Iranians tried to take President Trump's life. And so this is a reporter who has been unfortunately used by people who dislike Donald Trump in this government to push fake and false narratives. She should be ashamed of herself. And that's not what reporting is. Journalism is trying to find the facts and the truth. And this week we saw this same reporter being used to push a fake narrative to try to undermine the President of the United States. And more importantly, the brave fighter pilots who conducted one of the most successful operations in United States history. And I think the American people fully know that this operation was a complete and total success.
Back to our top story now. The Trump administration refuting a leaked Pentagon report that claimed the U.S. strikes had little impact on Iran's nuclear program. Joining us now is House Intel Chair and Arkansas Republican Congressman Rick Crawford. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. So where are you and where is your thinking on all of this? What should people believe?
Well, I think we buried the lead here. Look, the strikes were wildly successful, and what did they accomplish? It'd be less about the damage they inflicted on the installations there and more about what they did to bring Iran to the table.
Nasaan daw si
And
Elizabeth
essentially,
May?
this strike led to peace in the Middle East. And I think if we can focus on that, we can get past all this rhetoric about how much damage was inflicted or was not inflicted. And I think that's the real point of the story.
But some of the fallout appears to be, Congressman, that the president is maybe not going to be so free in sharing classified information with Congress. This, according to Axios, quote, Trump to limit sharing classified info with Congress after leak on Iran bombing damage. We are declaring a war on leakers, a senior White House official said on Wednesday. Now, Caroline Leavitt said she didn't know if this leak came off Capitol Hill or if it came from someone within the DIA or someone else. But what do you think about the president and the notion that he's not going to be so quickly sharing classified information with you folks on Congress?
Well, I understand his feeling on that. I mean, I'm equally outraged about leaks wherever they came from, and it's our responsibility in my lane and as chairman of this committee to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be good stewards of classified information. So we are redoubling our efforts at the committee level to make sure that none of this kind of thing would ever happen on our watch, at least on my watch.
Hi everyone.
Right, but I understand the president's
We're waiting for a driver.
We have to be also
If
conscious
no
of the
driver,
fact
we will have an extra driver.
Article 2 gives us authority to oversee the executive branch, and so there's a balance there that we need to strike, but we need to show the president that we're taking this seriously, and we are, and that's why we're redoubling our efforts to let him know that we can be trusted with classified material.
Well, Congressman, as you know, this White House continues to be pressed by the media on whether or not any of the uranium that was in Fort O, for example, was moved to begin with, noting the trucks that were pulling up. Caroline Leavitt was asked about this just a few moments ago, and here's how the White House is responding to that. Listen.
So we were watching closely, and there was no indication to the United States that any of that enriched uranium was moved prior to the strike.
So are you satisfied with that answer, or do you still have more questions about that?
Well, I can tell you this, that the president gets more and more in-depth intelligence than I get. And so if the president is satisfied with that, I'm satisfied with that, and I'm not going to question that.
So one other thing, and that is that there's supposed to be a classified briefing happening, and Democrats have been hopping up and down complaining about the fact that it hasn't happened yet. Now Senator Schumer is hopping up and down about the fact that he's only going to get the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State there before his committee. Listen to what he said.
Now they're trying to get away with sending only the Secretary of State and Defense for tomorrow, instead of the usual intelligence officials that attend the briefings.
Be, ano ba nangyari sa lipstick ko?
Briefing from only the Secretaries of State and Defense would be woefully insufficient. If they are the only ones in attendance, they will only
Nakikita mo ba dyan yung lipstick ko, Be?
wants them to say.
What's your response to that, Congressman?
That's sort of par for the course for Senator Schumer, so I try not to pay much attention to what he says.
All right, Congressman, I appreciate your time and joining us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. You bet. Thank you.
Boy, wouldn't that be something? All right, for
Kasi
more on
ang
the
dalawa lang ng
investigation into the
tawag.
leaks, let's bring in John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and former law clerk for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. See, here's what Caroline Levitt said about the leak just a short time ago in the briefing. Listen here.
Leaking top secret classified intelligence is a crime, and people need to be held accountable for that crime. This administration wants to ensure that classified intelligence is not ending up in irresponsible hands. We need to get to the bottom of it, and we need to strengthen that process to protect our national security and protect the American public.
So the provenance of this document was the Defense Intelligence Agency. We don't know where the leak came
Malapit
from.
kasi tayo sa
The
alwat,
contents
babi.
of the report were later confirmed to Fox News. I don't know if it was actually declassified, but it would seem at the moment that the leak occurred, this was classified information. So what are the remedies here under the statutes?
So there's something called the Espionage Act, which is the primary law that the Justice Department uses against leakers of classified information. If this person who leaked the document is in the DI, the Defense Intelligence Agency, or the Pentagon, and it's classified, it sounds like the report is classified top secret, if not higher, then they could be prosecuted and punished with up to 10 years in prison and a fine. It is actually the most serious thing that the government can do, other than charging someone with treason for releasing classified information that's so important and it is so important to the national defense. If you're Iran and you see that report or you learn information about that report, you will have some idea about what kind of intelligence assets we have in Iran,
mentor,
whether we can detect or not detect information. So this is exactly the kind of thing the Espionage Act is designed to punish.
Right, because as I recall, the report said that through visual reports and SIGINT, which is signals intelligence, so that may in some way be nodding to sources and methods.
Yes, and in fact, that could be another violation. Is one thing you're releasing the report. The other thing is you're releasing information about how we're able to intercept electronic communications on the other side, what you call SIGINT, signals intelligence. That itself is another violation of the Espionage Act. So whoever did this is in a lot of trouble, because you're talking about 20 years now in prison and fines. But we should also focus on, think about how this is going to harm the way our government makes national security decisions. When we're going to have the next bombing attack, we have to do the next damage assessment. This is going to cause problems for us actually credibly thinking about, did we cause enough damage? Should we go back? People are going to be reticent. They're not going to be candid in these documents if they're going to get leaked out into the open.
So the FBI is looking into this. The Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche says that he is prepared to bring journalists and other correspondents in to ask them questions about where this leak might have come from. And he says that nobody is immune to this, because there's a chance maybe it came off Capitol Hill, we don't know. He said that no one is immune from criminal liability for putting the safety of the United States at risk. But then there's the chain of custody kind of thing. So if it came out of the DIA, that you believe would be a crime. What if some lawmaker who was briefed on it released the information to a journalist? Would that be a crime? Is it a crime to publish it?
John, any Fox News host that needs legal representation, I'll give you a discount. But this is actually a very serious issue that the Justice Department, when I worked at the Justice Department, we had to grapple with this exact issue. The statute, Todd Blanche is right, the statute does not say journalists are off limits, Senate aides are off limits. It just says anyone who gets classified information, they're not authorized to handle it, and they release it or pass it on, and they intend to harm the United States, that's 10 years in jail. So the Justice Department has historically not gone after media organizations, not gone after hosts, because you would have a First Amendment claim. The courts have never upheld it, but you would have a First Amendment claim. I didn't steal anything. I was just doing my job as a member of the press to report.
Okay.
But, certainly, we've seen in the past that there have been some famous cases of people being jailed. Jack Teixeira, who is the Massachusetts Air National Guard service member, sentenced to 15 years for leaking hundreds of classified documents online. Bradley Manning, sentenced to 35 years for a role in WikiLeaks. So these are service members. These were people who got this out of the government servers. So we know what happens to them potentially. We'll see what happens if you're sort of two or three people down the line, I guess.
Yeah. The point is the government can best police this by punishing the people in the government who have the obligation to keep it really secret. It becomes, as you said, John, once you get into these chain of custody ideas, once you try to prove, does someone really have an intent to harm the United States when they got it, maybe when they published it? Those are harder prosecutions to make. So that's why the Justice Department has paused and not brought those cases.
Got it. Thank you for joining us today, John. It was great to get your expertise, and perhaps we will see you back here again tomorrow for some very important Supreme Court
later.
announcements.
I will.
Thanks, love to.
I will just ironing. It's a white
Media
dress.
from Iran's Supreme
Me and my
Leader,
friend,
Ayatollah Khamenei, claiming that Iran has, quote, nearly
We're
brought
waiting for the
Israel
driver.
to its knees. He is also declaring victory over
We
the
have
United
backup
States.
driver if we don't have.
They attacked our nuclear facilities, which is, of course, subject to independent prosecution in international courts. But they were not able to achieve anything significant. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't achieve their intended goal. The Islamic Republic delivered a hard slap to the face of America. It attacked one of America's key bases in the region, Al Udeid Air Base, and inflicted damage.
There's a lot of spin going on there. Let's bring in retired four-star General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst, former vice chief of staff of the Army, and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. He's trying to spin this
mentor,
for
I
his
know how
people.
to drive,
How
but I don't have
effective can he
license. That's
be,
why I don't have
given
a car.
the fact that they don't have a lot of free press in Iran, sir?
I just know how to drive, but I don't have a car.
Well, given that
I don't have license. I'm not allowed to drive
spread
here
around the
without
world. I have
license.
Iranian friends right here in this very international community of Washington, D.C. It's unlikely he can keep that secret, just as he has not been able to do it with other things. But it's still very revealing. I mean, it's not surprising.
I think I'm
He's dug his
gonna.
heels in here, but it certainly is disappointing. Because
I think I'm
he
gonna
refuses to
hide
face the reality.
someone.
And why doesn't he want to face it? Well, because
I
they're
hate
paranoid and
talking
insecure
nonsense.
about their own people, and he's trying to manipulate their opinion. And I think he knows, and certainly all of his leaders know,
Oh, my
that they're on
editor.
their knees here. I mean, he just came out of a bunker for the last
Where
12
are you?
days with Israeli jets flying over day and night. I mean, the psychological and emotional impact of something like
Anong
that
ginawa ni Rabi,
on the
be?
leaders, I mean, the population was terrified for sure, and delighted to know they're going to be able to recover from that. But certainly the leaders surrounding the Ayatollah know full well, how bad this situation is for them. And I think it presents some opportunities here to at least try to permanently change their behavior. I listened to the discussion that Senator Graham had, and I agree with him.
Marami nga tayo. Baka
Initially
kasalbi.
said, well, what's the purpose of having negotiations with these guys? We've taken down their nuclear program. That was the objective. And he knows full well, they're likely going to continue to stiff him.
Thank you,
But it
mentor.
is worth a try. And he changed his mind and said, no, let's get on with this thing. We have a lot to offer them if they're willing to make some change. But the change has got to be fundamental. I depart with the Senator just a little bit here. The first thing has got to be independent inspectors go to all nuclear sites, assess the damage. If it still needs to be dismantled, then they dismantle it. They don't agree to that. There's not much else to talk about. And then certainly you've got to stop funding the proxies. You've got to cease terrorist operations, and overall stop the malign and aggressive behavior in the region that has so destabilized the region for 45 years. And yes, recognize the state of Israel, that they have a right to exist. The reality is, will they comply with that? It's unlikely, but it's worth trying. And there's a pretty good deal on the
I have
table.
8 minutes more.
Survival,
And that is
potentially, right?
remove sanctions. Yeah,
So we're going to
survival.
check our
Remove
uniform
sanctions, free
and
trade,
our
kind of behave as a legitimate country,
our
maybe take
shoes.
the threat away from their people. If their quality of life goes up a little bit, it may take the edge off of them somewhat in terms of their constant consternation. I think they're aggravated by the fact that the economy is in a tank. Certainly are aggravated by the control that this regime has over their everyday life, their thoughts, their ideas, how they dress, their culture, everything. Some of that would never be removed as long as these thugs and killers are in charge. But I do think it's worth a try, and we shouldn't be dismissive of it.
Yeah, I mean, the president gave them 60 days to come to the table last time around, and perhaps there's another offer
John
to have some discussions. There's a ceasefire that's holding for a few days now. We all hope that continues to hold as the Ayatollah considers his options. We'll see what he decides to do. I want to ask you about this Pentagon briefing this morning, because I saw your response to it, and I could tell that you were very moved by parts of this briefing, and also struck by the tone of the defense secretary, and you compared him to a prior defense secretary. So if we can control him, let's play these back to back. First, the current defense secretary, and then Donald Rumsfeld.
From Africa.
The reality is, you want to call it destroyed, you want to call it defeated, you want to call it obliterated. Choose your word. This was an historically successful attack, and we should celebrate it as Americans.
It's interesting to me that a government that consistently does not tell the truth seems not to this. What do you think about this?
Some pushback there from Don Rumsfeld, a little trip down memory lane there for those of us who remember him in office. Your thoughts on what you heard in there this morning, sir?
Yeah, I mean, similar. I mean, the reasons were different, certainly. And I had a lot of dealings with Don Rumsfeld, and certainly if he had a thought, he expressed it. and the press room got a full dose there. But I think what we saw in
mentor from Africa, Ethiopia.
Just his incredible frustration dealing with such a misrepresentation, and his emotion and passion is driven by.
Where are you watching right now, John Rayna?
I believe was a fundamental insult to those who participated in the operation, and that drove the intensity.
I have only
of his
5 minutes to end my life.
Today. And look at that misreading of the report was intentional, given what was in that report, that it was preliminary, that it was low confidence. The top of the chain of command had not seen that report yet anyway, but here we are sharing it with the American people and our adversaries as well. But then the second part of the briefing by Chairman Keane, I thought was really stunning in the sense that he brought it alive for us in terms of the people. I've not seen anything quite like that before. I commend the general, for doing that, and so graphically illustrated what 2 minutes of life was like for 44 Army soldiers facing the biggest threat of their life, and their performance to protect the base and to survive dependent on how well they functioned as a team and how well they knew their job. And here's the other thing.
John
how well
Rayna,
they held on to their fears.
where are you living right now? Where are you watching me?
Don't be scared of being scared.
Thank you for
We
coming.
teach them how to hold on to that fear, and you can operate in a fear environment.
I have 3 minutes to end my life.
Environment.
Thank you, guys.
Very few people are born with that. We can train our people to cope with that kind of thing. And then the second thing, dealing with the actual bombing of the operation. And I was stunned when they said we had people working on this for 15 years, who one started in 2009. By the way, that was provided by Iranian resistance. And then they watched that target every single day as it emerged into something very sophisticated and almost
Thank you for watching. Nelson Lee from New Guinea.
I'm sure. And they concluded that we don't have anything in the arsenal. We have to get a special munition. They did that. They developed it. They tested it. And then we saw the marvelous results of it. We haven't done anything like that in terms of special munition, special target, time to develop it since the atomic bomb at the end of
I'm from the Philippines, and I'm working here as a housemaid in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, guys. Yeah.
More than 15 years of your life.
Extraordinary. You know, it's extraordinary dedication. It's extraordinarily patriotic. I'm so glad, as you are, that he shared this story with us. You think about these individuals going around with this in their mind and in their heart.
Thank you so
all day
much.
long.
So
This
I
is their
have
mission,
2 minutes
that
more.
they want to take out this Iranian nuclear facility,
Thank
and
you,
that they
Nelson.
are dedicating their lives to the proper study of the geography around it, the geology of the ground around it, every brick, everything that
Somebody's
they watched,
calling me
built,
now.
and then they said, you know what, we've now determined this is the kind of bomb that we're going to need to take it out. It's an extraordinary story, and I hope we hear a lot more about it. General
Yes,
Keane,
hello.
actually, everyone can hear a lot more
Yeah.
about it.
Let me add
please.
one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me add one thing real quickly. I mean,
Huh? No, it's Villa 28. I already sent you my location, right? Now, or the other side. I'm here in Villa 28. Okay. We are waiting here in front of Villa 28. Can you tell him? Thank you. Our driver Alma is coming. It's outside. He's outside actually. So guys, I have 30 seconds. 20 seconds. Coming to get the 1 hour. Alma, only 50 minutes. Please. Si Alma. Si Maureen na inis na. Mauna na daw siya sa Alwat Babe. Mahala siya. Thank you guys. Thank you everyone. Later I will give you guys. Okay, bye. Mahali ka muna, mag-bye-bye ka, be. Be, halika na. We're going down. Bye. Eksakto na, be. Andyan.